I'm really pleased to be here this afternoon to represent health among a group of what I presume are mostly educationalists. So it's going to be something maybe a little bit different. When Sue asked me, I think almost a year ago, if I would speak at today's AGM, I was very pleased to do so. She said, could I speak about the link between play and health? And I gave my title, my presentation, the title Play for Health. And then about a month ago, Sue said, I've thought up of a title for your presentation for you, which is on the next slide, which is why is a kindergarten stage important for our children's health? And that's fine, because they both represent the same thing. And what I hope to do in the next 20 minutes is to give my version of why it's important for young children to play for the rest of their lives. Because what I'm interested in at the moment, and what I've been researching for the past few years, is why play is important for all of our health of all of us. And we know that what happens in the early years is going to set the scene for the future. So next slide, please. I'm a health play specialist. Not many of us around. I don't know if anyone in this room has ever met anyone other than me who's a health play specialist. Hands up. Oh, well done. Hi. Hello, I'll talk to you later. So, like the red squirrel, we're an endangered species. On and off the endangered species list in line with austerity measures where they stand at the time. But there's about 1,000 health play specialists working in the UK. Across the health sector, in the community, in schools, and in one case in a prison, which is very innovative. And there are equivalents across the pond in the USA and Canada, where we're known as child life specialists, which is opens up another whole question. And in New Zealand and Australia and Hong Kong, where there's a burgeoning health play movement. Next slide, please. I've got Sue working for me now, which is very weird. So just as a bit of background, the seeds of Play for Health was sown by the Platt Report in 1959, which recognised that children who were sick and in hospital needed to play for their health and for their well-being, to mitigate against the separation from the parents, from the disruption of their routine, and from the fact that the people looking after them were not trained in child development. So, and also the Platt Report recommended that the people who organised that play should be specially trained for the task. And that's how we have come about. So 60 years later, there are play specialists working, as I've said, across the field. And play is recognised as an essential component of healthcare, paediatric healthcare. Okay, now that's it, that's where we are. So a disclaimer, after hearing about hearing Tam's talk words at the beginning about education policy, I'm not an educationalist. So what I say you're going to have to fit with your early years framework and curriculum for excellence and all of that, because I'm no expert in education. I'm a friend on paper with Peter Gray, our wonderful play pioneer who wrote the book Free to Learn, and who emphasises the fact that children will learn for themselves if they're given the opportunity and the permission to play. And that's where I'm coming from. Next slide, please. So Peter Gray, writing nowadays, is not saying anything new, and what I'm going to say is not going to be anything particularly new either, because 200 years ago, our own kindergarten pioneer, Robert Owen, from New Lanark, set up the first kindergarten in the UK, in Europe, in the world, on our own soil. And I've been to New Lanark many times, but recently went back with someone who'd never been before, and we did the official tour. And because of that, I came across this quote, which I absolutely love, especially the first phrase, which he said that in his kindergarten, the children were not to be annoyed by books. And I think he didn't mean the paper books. I think it was the book learning. My mother was a children's librarian. I grew up in a house of books, and I live in a house of books. But I think I love what he was saying, that the children were not to be annoyed with books, but were to be taught the uses and nature or qualities of the common things around them by familiar conversation when the children's curiosity was excited. And I think that's what we're talking about. When we're talking about kindergarten stage now, we're talking about what Robert Owen was saying and what was dissed at the time as being unachievable. But we are going to achieve what could not be achieved 200 years ago. Next slide, please. Okay, so we now have some pictures. So I'm not an educationalist. I don't know a great deal about learning in school, but I know a lot about learning. And most of what I know about learning, if not all of it, I've learned from little people like these. And the next slide, please. And these. And these. So I've got qualifications coming out of my ears, published books, read hundreds and thousands of books and journals and such like, but everything that is of use to me is what I have learnt in my practice. And I'm sure that many of you would say the same thing. So next slide, please. But as we know, play has an image problem. Anyone who has play in the title of their job is up against all the time, oh, that must be a cushy number, getting to play all day, a few nods over there. Yeah. Health play specialists working in hospitals had a very hard time when the rebanding of hospital grades went on, and health play specialists were sort of put on the same banding as a staff nurse. And the nursing profession was up in arms saying, what? You're getting paid the same as a staff nurse to play all day? Really? Haha. Not funny. So if you want to explain the value of play and why you're worth being paid the same as a staff nurse or a primary school teacher or any other professional, you need to deconstruct play for your audience. And I'm going to show you how we do that in the NHS. So next slide, please. So another quote from Peter Gray, and this is where I fall out with him temporarily, because what he's saying in this quote is that if we were to change the way we talked about play, to talk about it in some jargonistic language, maybe it would be taken more seriously. If we were to call it self-motivated practice of skills, which is what we're talking about. And he dismisses that because he says, well, if we did that, then it wouldn't be play anymore. What we need to focus on is its lightheartedness, its triviality, and its profundity. That's fine if you're writing a book called Free to Learn. If you're working in the NHS and you're trying to get the funding for a new play resource or a new colleague, or if you're working in a school and you're trying to convince your educational masters that it's important for children to play, you're not going to be talking trivial and light-hearted. You're going to be talking a different language. It's a compromise, but sometimes you have to make compromises to get where you want to be. So next slide, please. So why is it important for children to play wherever they are, in school, in hospital, in their communities? And the first part of this slide sums it up entirely, and I could stop there, but I'm not going to stop there. But a child's personal play history is one of the best indicators of their lifelong health and well-being. How they play from birth and through their early years and through their school years is not just going to make them more enthusiastic learners or happier or to improve the quality of their lives. It's actually going to help them to live longer and more healthy lives. And that's the message that we need to get across. So that when a health play specialist meets a child at their interface with the health service, on the surface, what we're doing is we're helping them get through a course of chemotherapy, open heart surgery, rehabilitation after illness. But we're doing much, much more than that. Because what we're doing is we're giving the child an opportunity to learn about themselves, about the world around them, and about how the two connect. And that is what's going to go forward with them. Long after they've forgotten being in hospital and their scars have healed and all that's left is the photos or fear of needles or something like that. Hopefully, their play experience during that episode will be with them for life, and they will learn really key messages that will make the difference in the future. Next slide, please. So, when we deconstruct the concept of play in order to repackage it for our audience, and emphasize that it's not a trivial matter. It's not just about making childhood more engaging or happier. We're getting the message across that play is crucial for public health and for creating the social movement that is called a culture of health. We need to be living in a culture of health, creating and living in a healthy society. We hear all the time about how unhealthy we are, especially here in Scotland, how bad everyone's teeth are, how fat everybody is, how terrible the diets are. We're all stressed and depressed and anxious. But so we need to be focusing on the health of our culture and how that comes about and learning from the positives. So, next slide, please. I'm going to whiz through some of these because I don't want to deprive John of the opportunity. I have some lovely images here which I'll explain in a minute. So the first thing a play specialist does when they meet a child in hospital is to think about how they can be engaged in physically active play. These are some of the sickest children in our society, and we are thinking, how can we get this child playing physically whilst they're in hospital, whilst they're going through their illness? So I've done tummy time in intensive care, I've done roly-polies with children on ventilator machines, we've had snowball fights on the cardiac ward. We have to think about how do we allow children to do what comes naturally to them, because children are biologically designed to move. It's a matter of survival. Here, small mammals are biologically designed to move so that they can get away from danger. It's what comes naturally. And we celebrate that from the start of life. So when the child does their first rollover, we're so excited and we do clap our handies, look, they've rolled over. And then they start to crawl, and then we take photos of the first steps, and then they climb up the slide by themselves. And amazing. And then they get to 4 or 5, we send them to school, and we say, sit still, don't fidget. Put your legs in a basket. What is it about legs in a basket? Legs were not made to go in baskets. Legs were made to run and jump, and I can't bear it. Anyway. So, the research shows that how physically active we are as adults affects how long we're going to live and how we're going to deal with the health risks that face us in terms of cardiovascular disease, diabetes, and all these other depressions of the illnesses of modern life. And the research that's done into the so-called super agers, which was reported earlier this year, some of you may have seen it in the press. The super agers are those of us, not yet, who reach 80. Anyone here who's 80? Not yet. Those who reach 80 with their physical and mental capacities still intact and able to live a quality of life. What is it about that cohort that is so different from everybody else? And what's different is that they have a social network and they do activities that they enjoy. Yeah, maybe some nods over there. So where do we teach children to do what they enjoy and to create a social network and to stay physically active? We teach it in school, in early years and in school. But we're not doing that. We're doing the opposite. So if we know that if you move, if you do something you like, and if you do it with other people, you're more likely to live long, healthy lives, why are we telling our children to stop moving? That's what I don't understand. Next slide, please. So I can't resist putting in this poem by the wife of Jack Pansep, who's one of our leading play scientists, neuroscientists. I've just taken one stanza and I just have to have this. I'm going to read it out for you. So, why the boys must take Ritalin. They're not swinging on ropes. Their palms are not growing calloused from ropes swinging out over ponds. They're not dropping 5 or 10 feet through bare air into the splash. They are not sinking cannonballs into the mud or bursting the surface, sucking a fair share of breath. They're not wrestling with dogs, brothers, sisters, or boys who sit next to them. They're not chasing birds, dogs, horses. They are never riding horses. They are never falling. So we give them drugs. We need to think about that. Sue's written a lot about that, but we need to think, why are we medicalizing? Why are we prescribing for natural behavior? It's a really, really serious thing. Okay, next slide, please. I can talk for ages, so I'm sorry. So we cover the physical side, play as mental capital. The big thing at the moment for the government is we need to invest in people's mental capital. Mental capital are the life skills that we learn that will help us when we're faced with choice. Basically, whether to eat that cream cake or eat the carrot instead. That's what they're on about. But that's what it means. So the research shows that play, which taps into our ability to experience curiosity, competence, and reciprocity, is the most engaging play of all. Isn't that what we do with children in early years and with school? In school, that's what we do in hospitals and healthcare settings with children. We respond to their curiosity, we imbue them with a sense of competence in a reciprocal relationship. 3 really key elements of play. Next slide, please. And this is the neuroscience behind it. So play is self-reinforcing because it feels good. If we do something that feels good, we're more likely to do it again. It's pretty basic neuroscience, really. So that when we do something that feels good, it reinforces the neural pathways in the brain and thus establishes a circular process of renewal of what Perry calls curiosity, pleasure, and play. We're curious about something, it feels good to discover more about it, so we do it again. Next slide, please. The other buzzword of the moment is well-being. I don't know when well-being joined our vocabulary, but anyway, it's all over the place, health and well-being. Play is the best expression of who we are, the best expression of our true selves. And did you come see it? It was Maslow, 1950s Maslow, who said that for humans to achieve a state of autonomy and self-actualization, we need to do things that make us feel good about ourselves. I mean, well-being is about being happy, basically. Being happy is very good for our health. It's been demonstrated in the scientific literature that it's good for our hearts, it's good for our bodies, and it's good for our brains. This lovely image, which Sue's nodding at, was featured in a recent exhibition in Edinburgh. I don't know if anyone other than myself and Sue got to see it. Oh, good, Kate, thank you. Play, Create, Relate by the organisation Garbled Edinburgh that works with people with learning disabilities. Fantastic exhibition, I hope everyone agrees with that. And this amazing piece of work was created over 3 years by a young man with profound learning disabilities and autism. And what he did was he collected the offcuts of wood off the floor of his workshop and gradually built this piece up. And I've met Stuart, who made this, and he is so proud of his flower. He's created this flower. And what a wonderful expression of all those skills we've been talking about. Reciprocity, competence, and a sense of mastery of his environment. Okay. Oh, and I just want to say that, this is very important. For a long time, we've been saying that the best way to deal with mental distress is to talk about it. I'm all for talking. I was trained in the talking therapies as a family therapist. I did loads of very clever talking for many years before I started playing. And I'm all for talking. But actually, the research now shows that doing is much more helpful than talking, or as helpful, if I don't want to challenge any talking therapist here. And that creative doing is probably one of the best ways of addressing mental health symptomatology. So whether it's painting or dancing or singing or throwing a pot or knitting or whatever, there is now the research published by the All-Party Parliamentary Group, APPG, on arts, health and well-being to make that direct link between, there's the scientific evidence there to show that actually doing creative activity is good for your health, for your mental health at any point in time. Where do children learn to paint and to sing and to dance? When they're in school, when they're in the early years. Or if you went to a very formal academic school like me, you stopped doing music and you stopped singing and dancing if you were academic, because those subjects didn't get you to university and beyond. So we're depriving children of the opportunity to protect their own mental health. We know there is a huge mental health problem at the moment because of the pressure that young people are under from a whole range of sources. And when they get to their exams and when they get to their first heartbreak and their marital breakdowns and their illnesses and all the things that we all come up against in life, what is going to help them? What's going to help them are those skills that they learn through play when they're young. So if they learn to express themselves in a way that feels good, that's going to make the difference between sinking or swimming, basically. Okay, next one. The other thing that's quite shocking, which I've discovered recently, is that there's a new killer on the block. And the new killer on the block is loneliness. And the organisation Relate have produced a report which shows that the quality of our social relationships is comparable to other risk factors such as smoking and alcohol consumption in terms of how long we live and how well we live. Where do children learn to make relationships that are going to help them through life and to avoid the hazards of loneliness? When they play. That's what we're teaching them. It's been said that we live in a society with an empathy deficit. We see trolling and online bullying and people shutting themselves away with their social media, and we're seeing the consequences all around us. I have many colleagues who are working in higher education who say they spend more time dealing with young adults' mental health than they do with education, because young people are under so much pressure from a variety of sources. Okay. Next one, please. Oh yeah, so very important. Don't know where my copy of that is, but anyway. Lovely picture from Nick Hedges of playing in the Gorbals. We've all spent the last 2 years, thanks to partly to Suzanne, largely to Suzanne and the film Resilience, thinking about how children can be helped to deal with adverse early experiences, such as being in hospital, which is what a lot of my work has been about. And we know that play is one of the things, along with positive social relationships, that is the protective shield against falling by the wayside. And the next one, yeah. So, when all else fails, when your managers are still not listening to you, and that money is still very firmly going elsewhere, we come back to the UN Convention. We say, but it's the children's right. They have a right to play, whether they're in school, whether they're in hospital, whether they're in the street. They have a right to play because it's there, enshrined in the United Nations Convention. They have the right to the highest standard of health, and if we're saying that play is a route to health, they have a right to play. So it's coming at it from a different angle. And this is a universal right, so this applies across the board. And I'm coming to the end now. Oh yeah, so a couple of years ago I came across this very curious quote, which was already 10 years out of date, but I want to share it with you because I think it's an opportunity for a reflection, as Anne says. So Bergen and Prunin Fromberg, whoever they are with such lovely Norwegian names, said that in the future, play will become so valued by adults that the value of play for children will be more recognised. However, they went on to say that play will be taken over by adults and that children will be required to earn the right to play after they've mastered an authoritatively determined body of knowledge. Now, this sounds more like it should have come from 200 years ago rather than from 12 years ago. But is that what's happening in society now? That the grown-ups are rediscovering the importance of play? We have Tough Mudder, we have adult gyms, we have dress however you want, stay at work. We know the popularity of creative arts, programs on television about making pots and painting and all those lovely things. And what are we doing? We're putting our children in inappropriate clothing, sending them to school, putting their legs in a basket, and what are we doing? We're filling them with some authoritatively determined body of knowledge, but not for long, hopefully. So finally, apologies to Peter Gray, but when it comes to health, our health, and the health of our children, the health of our society, play is not a trivial or light-hearted matter. It's a matter of survival, of physical, mental, social survival in our changing world. And it's play which makes all of our lives worth living. If we think about the things that are important in our lives, it's what we remember are the fun times, the times we laughed, the times we were with friends. Those are the things that count. And they don't just count because they make us feel good, they count because they're good for our health. So play is profound, but it's not a trivial matter. And that's, thank you, please go.